For indeed, we are distracted by so many things. Help us to keep our focus on you. Amen. Well, they were popular back in the 1980s and even into the 1990s, the WWJD bracelets. Now, a lot of you may have had those. What do they stand for? What would Jesus do? And they were important because they asked a very simple question. When people got into situations, they didn't know quite the answer. You got into a situation, you didn't know exactly how you should respond, which way you should go. What would Jesus do? And that was good. And you know where they came from? Okay. There was a book, In His Steps, by Charles Sheldon. And in that book, there was a group of people. And they decided that they would go for a year without entering any situation, without first asking that question of themselves, what would Jesus do, despite the consequences? That's the way that they would go. And this caught on. It caught on to the point that it became kind of like, well, Christian faction. And everyone had these. You know, in fact, if you didn't have a WWJD bracelet, a WWJD bookmark, a WWJD ring of some kind, then you were, in a lot of churches, thought, well, a little bit less than spiritual. You know, but that was okay, because you could go to your local bookstore and you could pick something up that would help you seem spiritual again. Now, here's the part where I want you to be brave. Raise your hand if you had anything that had WWJD on it. Okay, I thought so. All right, now, that's okay, because the idea behind the merchandise and the marketing of WWJD is a good one, okay? It's good to ask ourselves, what would Jesus do in all those situations? Particularly when it calls us to do some difficult things, like love that person that no one else wants to accept. To go ahead and forgive the persons or persons who wound us in a very hurtful way. To go ahead and respond in the right way, morally, when everybody else is getting into easy consequences. Those are good things. But there is a problem with the WWJD bracelets, and that is this. We don't always know how Jesus is going to respond. We don't always know how Jesus is going to react. We think we might know him pretty well, but we don't. He is always full of surprises, and we can't always predict how Jesus is going to give his answer. We don't know what he's going to say. We don't know what he's going to do. And guess what? He just might surprise us. He just might interrupt. He might disagree with our WWJD bracelet. And that's the situation that Martha found herself in when she wants Jesus to criticize and get after her sister Mary. Now, we just heard the story. Jesus and his disciples, they enter into the city, the town of Bethany, and you're familiar with that. Because there they go to stay at the home of their friends, Jesus' friends, Martha. Now Martha, some of the commentators think that she might have been a widow, but there really is no way of knowing that for sure. Martha owns her home, and that's unusual in that time, in that place. A home is big enough to hold a lot of guests. And so Martha is, she does good. She seems like she's a very hardworking person. She sees a situation, and by golly, she goes right at it. She's self-motivated. She reminds me of a woman named Lydia in the New Testament, in the book of Acts. Lydia is a very self-motivated, she's a rich businesswoman. And she's a leader in the early Christian church. She helps Paul in his ministry. And that's the type of woman that Martha seems to be. Now Martha, she has her home, and she lives there with her brother Lazarus and her sister Mary. And this is the same Lazarus that Jesus is going to raise from the dead later on. And so he has this really loving relationship with these three people. In fact, remember in John's Gospel, when he raises Lazarus from the dead, John says that when he gets to the tomb, that Jesus weeps. And actually, the Greek word is really, he sobs. He sobs at the tomb. So Jesus, he just loves these three people. He loves Martha and Lazarus and Mary. Now, again, a lot of commentators, they seem to think that Martha is the older of the two sisters. Scripture doesn't say. Maybe they think Martha is the oldest because she owns the home, or maybe they guess the birth order because of the way that they behave. Because a lot of people think that the older of the siblings is the more responsible one, and the younger one is has the more free spirit. Now, whether or not you give into that type of stereotype probably has to do with your own experience with your sister, or sisters you have known. You know, that probably is just the way that it goes. Well, when the story begins, Jesus has come to talk to them and to teach. And they're sitting around and talking, and Martha's is having a difficult time. Because in that time, in that place, hospitality is so very, very important. And in hospitality in those days, you couldn't do it very easily. You couldn't buy a bottle of wine, put some pizza rolls in the microwave and have a party in 15 minutes. It didn't work like that. It was a lot of hard work. And hospitality said a whole lot about how you valued yourself and your family, and the value that you put and the respect you put on your guest. And in that time and in that place, all the adult women were expected to take part in that preparation of that meal. But Luke tells us right away, from the beginning, that Mary chose not to do that, to sit at the feet of Jesus. And meanwhile, Martha, she is running around, she is working like crazy. And Martha, she has this worldview that, by golly, that is exactly what she's supposed to be doing. Her worldview is that hospitality is good, hospitality is important, that women do not spend their time listening to a rabbi. And she also has the view that everyone else agrees with her, that she is right. And everyone else is going to have that viewpoint too. Not that we ever do that. Not that we ever assume that we're right. Not that we ever think everybody's going to agree with us. Unless it's about politics, or money, or religion, how to raise kids, or how we think our family should react. Other than that, it's okay. But Martha has the worldview and thinks, why aren't people agreeing with me? And that's what she wants Jesus and Mary and the others to do as well. And now, Mary at the same time, by going and sitting with Jesus, she has taken on the role of a disciple. Now that doesn't seem like a big deal to you and to me, but back in those days, that was a big deal. That was scandalous. She was not supposed to do that. No woman, in fact, was allowed to be a disciple of a rabbi, a religious leader. For her to do that was such a scandalous thing. It was even more scandalous for Jesus to allow it. She was about to bring shame on her household and on herself. She wasn't supposed to do that. And yet she chooses to do it anyway. And at the same time, Martha, she's doing what is expected of her. She's doing what is socially allowed. She is doing a thing that is not scandalous. And Luke says that she is distracted by all these things. And when I hear those words that she is distracted by these things, I'm trying to get that around my brain and saying, why is she distracted? How is she distracted? Because, when you're making a meal, what's your mind on? The stuff you're supposed to do. and get the food out and get things on the stove and chop up the vegetables and do all that stuff. But I'm thinking that maybe Martha is distracted not by that. Maybe her distraction is inside her heart, because what her heart's desire is to be out there where Mary is. What she really wants is to be sitting out there also listening to Jesus. And yet, everybody else's expectations and her duties, what other people are wanting her to do, what they expect is for her to be back here doing all the preparations. I kind of picture Martha kind of popping in and out from the kitchen thinking, could I listen? No, I can't, because of all these other things I'm supposed to be doing. And her frustration grows and grows stronger and stronger until finally she says, Jesus, don't you care? And she says that, and it kind of hits like a thunderbolt. And then I think about all the times when I've done it. All the times when I say the same thing, that's maybe not so much out loud. No, maybe I do say it out loud when my frustration goes, Lord, don't you care? Don't you care what's happening to me? What's wrong with you, Jesus? Don't you even care about me? And then Martha, she goes ahead and she adds something. That my sister has left me to do all the work. She has left me to do all the work. Oh my goodness. Frustration. And you ever feel that way? And because at that point, I realized that what has done that, Mary she's made a conscious choice there. There was some point when Mary said, bye, I'm leaving the kitchen. And she's abandoned the pots and pans, and she has abandoned the meal, and she says, guess what? Making the chicken cordon bleu, that's not as important as going out there and sitting with Jesus. She's made the conscious choice to say there's something more important than making the meal. And Martha, she resents her for that decision. And she wants Jesus to say, Mary, you're wrong. And Martha, good job for you. Good job for you. And there's nothing wrong with Martha doing her hard work. And we know that. We understand that. And that's what makes this story so difficult, so tough. We get into that. We understand that. We know where she's coming from. Because guess what? There is stuff to be done. There is work to be done, and somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do it. And that's all right. Until it grows into something I call the Martha syndrome. The Martha syndrome is where you're going ahead and you're doing what you're supposed to do, but you want everybody else to know it. Look at me, because I'm doing this while she's just sitting in there being lazy. I'm doing all this stuff, Lord, all by myself. In fact, the Martha syndrome grows inside of us until the frustration grows, and we begin to think, I'm all by myself. I don't even want help. I don't even want you to help me anymore. You ever feel that way? I'm all alone. Lord, don't you care about that? I'm all alone in my suffering while the rest of them are out there. Oh, Lord. And we get to that way where we think, I'm in this all by myself. I'm doing all the work all by myself. Lord, why doesn't anybody else ever care about me? And Martha syndrome begins to grow. And she not only does that, but she also makes that demand of Jesus. Jesus, since I am all alone, you make her. You make her see how horrible she is. You yell at her. And so there's that progression there. First, she gets distracted by the work. In fact, that she can't be in there. And then she begins to get upset, and her frustration grows, and she questions whether or not Jesus even cares about her. And then she gets so angry, her venom begins to come out. She demands that Jesus do something about it. Oh, you ever get like that? You think that other people should be suffering the same way that you do. Somebody else should be going through the same thing that you're going through. If Mary can't be there, or she can't be there where Mary is, then neither should Mary be there. Martha has to get the hospitality, but by golly, Mary should have it too, instead of being out there with Jesus. There's work to be done, and somebody's got to do it. Garrison Kyler talks about that whole somebody's got to do it defense. He says what it does is it points to this double-edged sword that Martha has used to stab herself in the heart. He says that the two edges of the sword are number one, the sense of self-worthlessness. And number two, at the same time, this sense of self-importance. The sense of self-worthlessness in thinking that, okay, sitting out there at the feet of Jesus, that's okay for some people, but not for little old me. And a sense of self-worth in thinking, okay, God, I'll take care of the party. I'll take care of my family. I'll take care of the situation. I'll take care of the world, even though nobody else cares. It's okay, God. At least you got me, Lord. You should be glad you got me to do all this work for you. You know, nobody else will, God, but I'll take care of the world for you. And I can see Jesus is kind of trying to back up, ease Martha's anxiety. Martha, come on now. Just chill out a bit, you know. You got to realize something. Okay? I don't need you to be here as much as you need me to be here for you. You know, how many times do we run ourselves to death and at the end of the day just feel frustrated? How many times do we spend our time running after God, trying to please God, but please other people? Yet instead of feeling the joy that we should have, and instead of feeling the fulfillment that we need to know, instead of having the rest that we ought to have, at the end of the day, all we have is the anxiety. And all we have is the frustration. And all we have is that sense of despair. You know, we got that instead. What's happening? What is wrong with that? How come it ends up that way? That doesn't seem right, does it? What's going on here? Anyway, why doesn't it work out the way it should? I mean, why does something that's so good seem so wrong? Because we know that that's why, you know, part of why we created was to go ahead and be servants. We say in this church that the greatest form of worship is to be have a servant lifestyle, right? So if that's true, then why can't being a servant give us that type of joy? I think what we have to realize is that being a servant means that we see Jesus in everything we do. I think it means that being a servant is not so much a burden as it is being a joy. That being a servant is actually a gift. And guess what? The Lord doesn't need us to do anything. Hear that? The Lord does not need us to do anything. He gets along quite fine without us. And that doing things for Him, being a servant for Him, working for Him, that's simply a gift that He gives us so that we can share in giving His love in some very practical ways. We were not created for the work. The work was created for us as a gift to us so that we can share in His love. But how do we do that? How do we get around it? How do we get around the frustration, Lord, again, when the lawn needs to be mowed? and somebody's got to do the shopping, and somebody's got to do the meal. How do we get around that, Lord, when somebody's got to do all the stuff? And I think of a guy named Nicholas Herman who lived back in the 17th century. And he wasn't very well educated. And he had a job as a footman and as a soldier. Didn't do very good at either one. But then when he was 18 years old, he had this conversion experience. It's really kind of simple. He was walking out in the woods one day, and he saw this tree, and it was wintertime. And he just thought to himself, wow, you know what? In a few months, that thing is going to have leaves on it. And flowers. That's cool. And he thought, that's kind of like the resurrection. He thought if a tree could do that, go from being bare to being alive and flowers, he thought, if God can do that, then God can be faithful in anything. And so he decides to go to a monastery and become a part of a monastery. And the monks there, they said, okay, you be part of the monastery. They didn't think he was too bright either. So they didn't put him into a job of copying the scriptures or anything like that. They sent him to work down in the kitchen. Now, when he was in the monastery, he took a different name, Brother Lawrence. And Brother Lawrence took a time of prayer, and he had all the Martha jobs in the monastery. He made meal for the 100 monks who were there. And while he was down there in the kitchen, he began to realize something. That yes, he could go up into the chapel to pray, but he realized that God was just as real down there in the kitchen. And his prayer became, O Lord of the universe, but Lord of the pots and the pans and of all things. Make me a saint in the preparations of the meal and the washing up of the pans. And that became his prayer, became his lifestyle. He said, I realize that the Lord is just as much here as when I am up in the chapel. And in all the noise that is down here, when other people even are down here and making some noise, I am as close to God here as when I am taking Holy Communion. And that began to change his life. Understand that God is present even in the midst of the work. So, when you get upset, when you think that other people aren't carrying your weight, when you get distracted because other people, it seems like, aren't doing their part, you know what you need to do? You need to step back. You need to take care of yourself physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You need to re-examine why it is that you're doing the things that you do, what the work is all about. You need to stop for yourself for that sake. Stop. Re-examine what your life is all about. Remember to take that double-edged sword and give it back to God so you're not stabbing yourself in the heart anymore. Mary, she got into that. Mary understood that. Mary understood that, yes, there were some things that she was called to do. Yes, there were some expectations that other people had, but there was something that was more important. Something more important than the roles that she was supposed to have. Something more important than getting a meal ready. That in that God-given moment that she had, that there was something that was even more important, and that was sitting with Jesus and having that relationship with him. That same Jesus held out his hand to Martha, pull her in, and let her sit right there in the same way. What we need to do is to remember, we don't have to carry the world on our shoulders. Guess what? The world's not going to stop revolving. Okay? If you stop doing things. If you don't get everything done, the world's not going to stop spinning. It's okay. And God's going to keep on loving you if you don't get everything done. And God's going to keep on loving you no matter what. If you prepare a 7-course meal, all you can muster up is peanut butter and jelly. Okay? That part doesn't matter. What is important is that we do not let things distract us. especially the busyness of life, distract us from what's most important, and that's our relationship with Him. Let's pray. Oh God, we are so much like Martha. We get so busy, and we let those distractions keep us away from you. Lord, teach us, move us to step back. Remind us what's really important, and to sit down at your feet to listen to you. Amen.